everyone, it's Alyssa here at the Washington Township Library, and our teen craft for this month is a paint-along gingerbread house. So this is what we're going to make. And of course, like every craft that we do, it is completely customizable. You can follow me as closely or as loosely as you would like. So in your kit, you're going to get your plain canvas, not painted like this. You're going to get your plain white canvas. You're going to get what I used for this is let me wash them off, a round brush and a flat brush, and a sponge. And you're also going to get this printable, this sheet. It is from StepByStepPainting.com, and so this is what we're going to use. And to trace this onto our canvas, you are also going to get something that we call carbon paper. So I will show you. There's like a darker side that if you rub your finger on, you might get a little bit of like a graphite on it. And then there's the back side, which is a little lighter, almost gray. But so when we put it down, I'll show you, you make sure that you put the very dark side that you can get the residue from onto your canvas, and we trace onto the back. This is really simple and it's really fun, and like I said, totally customizable. So have fun with it, and I'll show you how to do it. Let's get going. To start, I have dipped my sponge into the water and then the light blue and the white, and we're mixing it together, and we are working all across our board. I am not doing the very, very bottom of the board. I already traced my image just to show you that you don't need to go to the bottom because that will be snow. I'm getting this really streaky, and I'm just having lots of fun with the colors and textures, and then we need to let this dry completely before we can move on. Now that it's completely dry, I can trace out my image with the carbon paper. So the very, very dark side that has the graphite residue is what goes face down. Position it where you would like on your board, and then we're putting our image over it. And when I run my pencil over the lines, it is going to transfer the graphite in those places only to the board. So you can trace as many or as little details as you would like. I myself am not very good at drawing, so I need all the help that I can get. If you know maybe you just need the shape of the house or some of the windows or the lollipops, whatever it is, you can trace whatever you would like, but you could also add in your own details and get really creative. Now that that's done, I'm going to go in and add my white, a nice bright white. I'm just going to try to get my line pretty solid, but there will be multiple opportunities to fix that up and clean it up as I go. You can add multiple layers of your white. You can let it dry and add another layer if you want it to be more opaque. It's up to you. It's your image. Of course, I did speed this video up, so at any point in time that you need to, you can pause the video and catch up or go back. And you can use this video to your advantage to really do what you need to do on your own time as you work your way through this painting. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use our brown for our gingerbread house. You have a different color brown than I have. You're going to mix the two together. This is a little bit of a darker brown, and I'm mixing it with some white, as you can see, to get a lighter color. But your color brown will be much better. And I'm just going in and adding in the brown. The way that we're going to do this is with up and down strokes. Right now I'm very carefully trying not to go out of the lines, and I'm doing little strokes. But as I go on, you'll see I'm elongating the up and down. That's our texture of our gingerbread. We don't want to swirl back and forth and side to side. As you can see, I'm painting around the door and the windows because I didn't really want to have to paint over those, but you'll see later on, I think I should have painted over the windows because it came out much neater to then put the white in later. You'll see. I would paint over it if I were you. You can always retrace with your graphite paper to add in some of the details again. As I finish all of the brown, you'll see I'm adding some white in just to lighten it up because my paint did dry a little darker, but also the streaks of white, the uneven color, just gives it some fun texture and it looks more natural and a little bit less one note and perfect. You can do this however you would like, but me lightening up my color a little bit also allowed me to add some dark shadows in with the black a little bit later. I'm using some of the reserved darker brown to paint in my door next. It's just a little bit darker. I'm just trying to be really neat. That outer edge is going to be white, so it can be frosting, or I made mine into a candy cane, whichever you would like it to be. Now I'm doing the darker brown, and I'll eventually mix it with some black like I said before, just to get some shadowing underneath the roof because there would be an overhang, so there would be a natural shadow, and just around the edges to give our gingerbread house some dimension. Don't worry about the edges of the white snow so much, as you can continue to clean that up a little bit later as all of the paint is dry. I cleaned my brush really, really well and got some bright, stark white onto it to start creating the snow roof, or I guess it would be frosting. I'm making it really lumpy and bumpy, and I'm just making it look kind of fun. It could be whatever you want it to be, and I will go back on that again. It's a little sheer, so I can go back on that in another layer when it dries. Same with the door. I'm going around the door, and I accidentally picked up some brown paint that wasn't dry, so when the white is dry, I can go back in and make that look as perfect as I want it to be, or not perfect. It's your painting. You can do whatever you would like. Okay, I'm going to switch to the skinnier round brush now and dip it in my white. You're going to see what I was talking about before with maybe I should have painted the whole thing brown and not left the windows. It's a little hard for me to do this and keep it really neat, but also I realized I was going to need to paint inside the window panes to make it look like a real gingerbread house. You'll see what I mean on this one next, how much better and neater it looks. And I think I should have done that with the white from the get-go. So you can see now with the tiny, tiny brush, I was really trying to get into each window pane with the brown. Right, if it were a gingerbread house, we put the frosting on top of it. There are no cutouts unless we're doing a very fancy gingerbread house, in which case, good for you. This was a little hard and not as neat, so you'll see how I did it on the other side eventually once it is dry. In the meantime, again, making sure my brush is clean, I'm going to go in and do the chimney and paint that all white. Again, once it's a little bit dry, I'll go in and do a second coat so it's a little more opaque. But eventually this will have candy cane stripes, but you can do whatever you would like with it. And I'm going over my roof again to make it more opaque and solid and make some of the lines a little more lumpy and frosty looking. Alright, I touched up the door as well, and now with my thin brush again, I'm making my frosting window. You can see how much neater and easier it is with the background already brown, and I feel like this side just came out much neater. I'm now dipping my brush that has a lot of white in it into the light blue, and on the bottoms of all of these white lines I'm adding a little bit of shading just to make it look more three-dimensional. It's easier to do when the paint is dry, not so easy to do while the white is still wet, but you can do this in layers. Now I'm doing my icicles. I'm doing this kind of freehand. If you wanted to trace it again, or if you can still see the lines from your graphite drawing, that would be great, but I'm just freehanding it. Sometimes it's a little easier to do this if you dip your brush in water first. The paint flows a little bit better. And so I'm just kind of thinking, if I were dripping frosting down from a gingerbread house, how would it fall and what would it look like? As with all of the other white pieces, when this is dry, I can go back in and make it a little bit more opaque so it really looks like thick frosting. But I'm just kind of letting the shape happen naturally and just kind of making it up as I go along. There's no such thing as perfect for this picture. Just like with the windows, I'm doing the light blue with a lot of white still on my brush, and kind of underneath and in between, I am adding some blue shading to my frosting icicles, and also kind of underneath the roof line again where maybe there would naturally be some shadows. So this is just a first layer. Eventually later on, as the white and the blue dry, I'll go back in with some more white and some more blue and add some more blending. So on the drawing you got, there was a heart that was kind of like a piece of candy, but I decided that I wanted to do a peppermint swirl. This is totally customizable. You could do peppermint, you could do gumdrops, you could do a heart, you could do a star, whatever you want. So for my peppermint swirl, I'm just laying down some white in as best of a circle as I can do freehand, and I'm layering it on so that it's nice and opaque. I will wait for it to dry before I add the red. Meanwhile, the door is dry, so I'm going to add some candy cane stripes. This may take a couple of layers of the red to make it the way you want, but just go slow and work on your lines. And of course, again, it doesn't need to be perfect. You can do thick lines, thin lines, a few lines, no lines, and just make it regular frosting. I'm also going to add some stripes to my chimney. Like I said before, I wanted that to be candy cane striped. You could leave it just white if you want, like just frosting, or you could turn it into a different candy. Next, we're going to start to decorate our house with gumdrops. So I'm getting my other colors ready, and I'm just going to do the gumdrops on the roof in a pattern. You'll see I kind of messed it up because I wasn't paying attention. But also, if you don't want to do a pattern and you want it to be random, that's fine. So I'm just doing the red ones all first, so I don't need to keep washing my brush. So I'm doing all of the red ones on the roof first, and then also we're going to do colorful gumdrops leading away from the door like a little path. So we're going to do some perspective here. So the ones that are closer to the door are smaller, and the ones that are closer to you coming down are a lot bigger. And they're not really round shapes, they're just kind of flat half round gumdrops. And again, you can add extra layers to your paint as it dries to get it to be more opaque. Next, I'm going to do the yellow with a clean brush, and I'll do the yellow on the snow for the cobblestone gumdrop path as well. I'm going to do this same thing with the blue and the green and do the whole path. You can make your path look like however you would like it to look. It doesn't need to be exactly like mine. If you want to do one color, you can do that. If you want to do a pattern, you could do that. Mine is kind of random. And once these are dry, I'll also go back in and add in little white dots for sugar on the gumdrops and also as highlights on the little cobblestone gumdrops down below. While I wait to add my highlights and touch up my cobblestones and gumdrops, I'm touching up all of the white paint, so the frosting icicles and the white that's going to be my little peppermint squirrel candy and my windows, including, like I said before, this is the time to go in with that light blue for the shadow and kind of blend it in with some of the white, and now that everything is dry, it'll look a little bit better. So you can see I'm definitely using this time as some of my layers dry to touch up the red because the red was coming off a little too sheer. I needed to repaint that one red gumdrop. I'm adding some extra little stones in front of my house for the little candy pathway. I did the shading of the white. I wanted the yellow also to be a little bit more vibrant because that was also kind of sheer, and you could see the difference against the white background. The yellow really popped, but against the sky it wasn't. So you can work in layers and just keep adding, and that will really help. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is make sure that I have a clean brush because we're going to be working in the white. So I'm making little swirls for the smokestack for the chimney. And don't worry if these aren't perfect on the first go, you can touch them up. We're also going to add a little outline to it. And now this is where I add the little white highlight like I was saying before. So I'm doing tiny little dots with the tip of my round brush, just very, very lightly. I'm not even pressing, I'm just kind of tapping. And then I'm doing a little white highlight on the top following the rounded edge of those little cobblestones, candy cobblestones. I'm doing one color at a time because I did notice that some of my colors weren't 100% dry yet. So again, I want to prevent color mixing or having to wash my brush constantly. So I did one color at a time of the cobblestones and the gumdrops. The next thing I'm going to do is go back into my red and create the swirl of my peppermint. You can do this however you want. As I've said, it doesn't even need to be a peppermint. It could be a heart like it is in the original sketch. It could be a different sort of peppermint, maybe not a swirl. Maybe it looks more like a regular peppermint candy with the little triangles or whatnot. It could be more colorful. It could be a sour lemon candy. It could be a red hot candy. It could be a grouping of jelly beans. So it can be whatever you want, and I'm just going to continue to touch this up as I go. I'm cleaning my round brush really well and getting it a little bit wet and sticking it in the green paint to do my trees. So I'm just kind of working back and forth really fast and going kind of downwards. So they're almost like little quick V's, but they almost come off looking like kind of feathery. And then when you get down to the bottom, you can kind of fill it in using the same quick motion, the little V's going downward, or you can even do some upward strokes for texture. And I'm going to do that with my second one as well. And then you can play around with the colors. I added a little bit of white to the green to get some dimension, and I went over the top of that just to add little layers so you can see maybe some branches are sticking further out, some are further in. And then eventually when this is dry, I'll go over it with just some white to make it look kind of snowy. Next, you're going to use your darker brown color to just create a little line, and that's your tree trunk. When we go back over with the white a little bit later, I'll cover some of that if we feel like it's sticking out too much. Next, I'm using black, and I'm going to kind of water it down again. This makes it flow a little nicer. And I'm adding just a little kind of outline for dimension underneath each of these little cobblestones. I'm going to add it to my peppermint swirl. I'm going to outline my chimney and some of the little tendrils of smoke coming from the chimney as well. So see, that's what I was talking about before. Don't worry if your white's not perfect. I'm going to make sure I add in my little doorknob. You can make this any kind of candy you want. Okay, so this is where I'm going in with my white for my trees, my little bit of snow. See, it just adds a nice highlight and some dimension and some snow because it's a little snowy out maybe. And now I'm going to work on the candy, the lollipop and the candy cane. So I'm taking just white, and I'm using kind of the flatter brush because I feel like it's easier to make a nice circle with that. And then making this stick out of black, and then you can add some white highlight to it while it's still kind of wet. It doesn't need to be perfect, it's alright. Mine's not. And I'm going to use the white to make the candy cane. I can still see my outline here, so that's really helpful for me. And then I'm just going to touch up the white, and my lollipop is just going to have a little bit of all of the colors. So see, I'm starting with the red and I'm just kind of swirling it, and it doesn't need to be perfect. If you've seen really colorful lollipops, they don't always need to be super, super perfect. And you could do this however you would like. You could do just red, like a peppermint swirl lollipop. You can do just blue, maybe you like blue raspberry. You could do whatever you would like, but I'm using all of the colors to create a really fun swirly lollipop. While I'm waiting for the candy cane to dry so I can do my red stripes, I'm touching up the white snow a little bit, and I'm going to use the back of my brush to dot little snowflakes in the sky. So I'm just using the hard back end of the brush and dipping it into the white and making little polka dots. Okay, now I'm using the thin round brush and going into the red paint to make the stripes on my candy cane. And kind of as I've seen the whole time, the red is kind of a little sheer over this white, so I will do some layers as I go. I'll make it a little thicker, a little thinner, and just kind of figure it out as I go. This can look like whatever you want to look like. Some candy canes have yellow and green in them, some have blue in them, so you can really make it colorful if you want. I'm also adding the black outline to this candy cane too. I think it looks nice, and there's a little bit of consistency with more outline on this, and it makes it look kind of finished. Speaking of finished, guess what? That's it. We are done. You can add whatever else you would like to it, but this is my finished product. I hope you love yours.